Welcome. You're listening to the Good Girls Don't podcast with Ashley Ray
and Verity Mansfield.
This is the podcast where we smash those rules that we've been taught to follow both as men and women and burn the damn rule book. We're tackling the big issues and the issues nobody wants to talk about, and we'll be fiercely feminist about it.
This podcast is about inspiration, education, compassion, and being the change that you need to see in this world. This podcast is for the trailblazers, the freedom fighters, and the soul igniters, and all the women just like you who are ready to break the good girl rules and be heard.
We acknowledge the traditional custodians of Australia and its First Nations people on which this podcast is produced and consumed. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging.
Get ready for the revolution. It's coming to you now. It's coming to you now. We're gonna sing it, revolution. And they'll never bring us down. No, they'll never bring us down.
Hey Verity, did you know that not all superheroes wear leotards and capes?
Did you know that not all superheroes have penises?
Excuse me? Explain yourself, young lady.
Shock horror. So we came across this really beautiful human being. Her name's Kelly Petering. And she's literally a superhero, and she's a female. And I just found it so fascinating coming across her, because so often in society, our superheroes are depicted as male, and even, we were talking with some other women in a completely different group about our children and the role models they have, and how Paw Patrol, which is this cartoon of little animals that, go around and save their community, all of the ones that actually take the risks, all the ones that do the saving are all male. I think they're all puppy dogs. And yet the female is left to fly up safely in the air, be away from everything, and to just watch safely from a distance. And there was an incident where all of these mothers started writing in and saying, this is actually really sexist. There's 5 males, there's 1 female, and she plays it safe. And so they created a whole brand new character based on the feedback to bring in another female into Paw Patrol, which made they made this other female character the evil kind of bitch of the whole cartoon series, which led to even more outrage. But it just creates this image that we do have, this story that goes on in society, that men are the superheroes, men are the ones that take the risks, and women either need to be safely out the way, or if they're involved in the risk, they somehow created the problem in the first place. And that's why I think it was so important to have someone like Kelly on to come speak to us about being a female superhero. Now, if you don't know Kelly actually started off as a volunteer firefighter in Western Australia. And what I loved about Kelly was she was still insisting on going out there and fighting fires pregnant. And
not just a little bit pregnant, a lot pregnant.
Fully pregnant. And the only way that she stopped, what made her stop, was nothing to do with being a female or having a precious condition or carrying precious cargo and all that bullshit we talk about. But that she could not lift her leg up because her stomach was physically in the way. She couldn't lift her leg up high enough to actually get into the fire trucks. And we had such a great laugh about this, and it really led to a really beautiful conversation about what it is we expect of women, especially in motherhood, and just how we challenge those norms. And Kelly now, as a mother, is still involved in superhero business as a what was it called? It's
she's
a public officer, community officer.
She's a community officer, which is kind of like a secondment to the local ambulance service in her town. And on top of that, she's also a hotelier. So I mean, she's got a lot going on.
She's got a lot going on, and we found her absolutely fascinating. And so we had this great conversation with Kelly about her experience as a pregnant firefighter, the stereotypes around women, especially mothers, that put themselves in the face of danger. why connecting to our community is so crucial, especially for women who are experiencing motherhood and who aren't
Yeah.
losing their identity in motherhood.
Oh my God, I loved this bit so much about Kelly because I don't have children, but I see a lot of women who do have children. They get completely lost in the identity of motherhood, and they forget really who they are outside of that role. And it breaks my heart a little bit
Yeah.
that everything all the
And so
time is
many.
about seeking validation as a mother.
Yeah, and they do. Like, there's so many women talk about the loneliness of motherhood. And,
Yeah.
it's really amazing to have Kelly to talk to and see this amazingly confident superhero of a woman, but her journey actually started off as a painfully shy child, and how she actually had to learn the difference between confidence and courage. And she had to learn how to be confident. And I think that was such a beautiful conversation, because so often we think confidence is just something that, they're born with, and it's not. It's
Maybe
something
she's
that we
born with
can,
it.
maybe she's born with it, but it's something that we can cultivate and
Maybe it's
grow.
marketing.
Maybe it's marketing, yeah. So we love this conversation. Kelly is an entrepreneur, speaker, trainer, and she helps women all the way around the world to build that self-confidence within themselves, just like she did, so they can really shine in the areas that they've always wanted to. So we've loved having Kelly on. This is such a lovely conversation to have had.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I think you'll really enjoy it. And hearing just a completely different, I think, something that's a bit out of the box. What I love is that Kelly's not out there on TV and in magazines. She's doing her thing because she wants to do it in her town. Like it's really quite beautiful and really awesome.
Yeah.
So stay tuned because this is coming up in just a tick. Kelly, welcome to the Good Girls Don't podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, we're so excited to have you here. And one of the things I absolutely fell in love with you about was that you're kind of like this female superhero. And
She is.
She is. And I think it's such an amazing thing, because we actually, came across you just as, we have all of this massive bushfire crisis in Australia. And we've, been dominated with seeing so many male firefighters, and we've only just seen little snippets of a female firefighter here and there, and so I think it's such like a beautiful thing that you've fallen into our laps at this time. But yeah, so how did you actually start off becoming a volunteer firefighter?
So I suppose a couple of years ago now, I was over in WA working in the mining industry, and at the time, the place that I was at, it was really community oriented, and part of that was the volunteer fire and rescue service. And I'd never imagined that I would get into this kind of a field, but something just sort of clicked for me. And there were a couple of women that were there in the volunteer fire brigade who said, you should come along, just come on down to a training and see what it's like. I was like, oh, okay, why not? Let's give it a go. And I just absolutely loved it because it was so challenging for me. And, during all the trainings and all that kind of thing, because there's a lot of training sort of when you first start through the volunteers service. And I just absolutely loved how much it challenged me, and also the community aspect of it in that town, because we were really isolated. We're sort of halfway between Perth and Broome in the middle of nowhere. And there was this amazing community. Yeah, just this amazing community. And it really centered around the fire and rescue team. And that's what it was for me. It was a really great team to be involved in. And that's, I think, the biggest thing that drew me towards it.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, because I know that my partner is talking about becoming a volunteer firefighter. And when this has come up in conversations with other people, I always hear women saying, oh yeah, women can get involved too. Like, you can bake cakes for the firefighters and provide them with like food and water.
What?
And it's very much like there's this image that we have where men go do the risky, dangerous work and women stay where it's safe and bake cookies
It's
and
very Downton
open
Abbey like, isn't it, that
open,
view?
bottles
Yeah.
of water for them. And it's also, I was thinking about it myself and, thinking, oh my God, like how do I want to put my life in danger? How much risk do I want to have in my life as a mother? And I know that this is something that, is really sort of juicy for you because you're also a mother and you have this insane story, which I absolutely love, about being pregnant as a firefighter.
Yeah, it didn't really seem insane to me at the time, because I was just doing what I do, and I just happened to be pregnant at the time, and I was working at that point as an emergency management officer in the mining industry, and so so I was also a volunteer at the same time, so they kind of went hand in hand. And yeah, there were a number of bushfires during the time that I was pregnant, and I just didn't even think twice about going out and doing what I do, doing my job while I was pregnant. It just really didn't even cross my mind at all that it would be something that would be seen as possibly dangerous or risky. Yeah.
Did you
know-
ever get any criticism for it? Like, did anyone ever make you feel that it was like an irresponsible thing to do? Because we do tend to
No.
have quite sexist ideas around motherhood and
Yeah.
about,
Pregnancy
don't do
especially.
anything. Yeah, don't do anything. Like you can't eat, certain cheeses.
Yes. Oh God.
But yeah, go fight a bushfire. That we do as a society hold very sort of strange ideas around motherhood.
Yeah, and I'm not sure whether that was coming from my thinking, where it just wasn't an issue for me, or whether it was coming from our captain and my boss at the job, who was the same person. And he was really encouraging, and he was like, you know what, you're pregnant. It doesn't change anything in work. I mean, obviously, if you feel you can't do something like lifting heavy things, or there are going to be probably some boundaries, but at the end of the day, it was up to me to decide what was the right thing to do. So I never felt any kind of pressure, or that I was doing something that was wrong. So
That
It's
is
kind
so
of
awesome.
amazing because I never hear that story from mums to be.
yeah, I actually was quite lucky, and I mean the pregnancy for me, to be honest, was not planned and very out of the blue, and something that I'd never even thought I would contemplate. And so I was always kind of like, I'm not going to have kids. I love the life that I'm leading right now. And then it happened, and I was like, oh, right. What do I do now? And so for me, that time was, whilst it was quite challenging for me personally, going through that kind of mental state of complete and utter change,
Yeah.
I was really lucky in the sense that I had a really great support network in that community, and I think the fire and rescue was a huge part of that. And having a lot of other women on the team, especially a lot of other women who were mothers, rightly so, like they were mothers of older, like most of the women there, they had kids in their 20s. So they had been through that phase and kind of then come into the fire and rescue. So there wasn't anyone at the same time that had young kids. Oh no, actually I lie, there was. Yeah, there was. There was another lady there who had 3 kids, who was 3 kids under 10 or 12. And so it just was normal. It didn't seem like it was something that I shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, that's so incredible because, like, as we've all been watching on, social media and on the news, like, we do not see a lot of female firefighters being interviewed or being presented in the media.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether that's because on a national scale, I suppose, and in the actual, like the MFB or the actual fire services that are not volunteer based, it's
Yeah.
actually really difficult for women to get in. because because all the tests to actually become a paid firefighter, there's no modifications for females. So they're doing exactly the same tests as males. And I mean, obviously women are built differently, and there are different capabilities that women have to men. Like chin-ups, for example.
Yeah, I can't
It's
do
really
one.
hard for women, like just our body shapes. It's really hard to do chin-ups. And so
That sounds like hell on earth to me.
yeah. So there's it is really difficult for women to get into the fire brigade. And the reason I say that is because one of my friends who was with us in the volunteer capacity and was also working as an emergency management officer had tried out a number of times to get into the Perth fire brigades, but fell short on a number of them because of the physical capabilities. And she was super, super fit. So it wasn't like she wouldn't be able to do the job, because she was already doing the job.
Already doing it.
But just for that kind of a standard. And maybe that's one of the reasons that in the media at the moment there's not a lot of women, because there just isn't a lot of women as paid firefighters. And I think that's one of the reasons.
I'd love to ask you some nosy questions right now about this.
Go, Ashley.
I'm really curious, did you ever feel like there was like a rivalry between volunteer versus paid fireys?
So the town that I was in, there was only 5 or 6 emergency management, so paid from the mining perspective. And emergency management for us covered medical, fire and rescue, working at heights, like a number of different things. So it wasn't just firefighting. And but also all of the emergency management, paid members were part of the volunteers as well. So it wasn't like there was a segregation or separation. It was kind of like everyone worked together. And I think that had a lot to do with the captain who was leading the team, who was really inclusive and was just a phenomenal leader.
Wow. All right. Now, more nosy questions, because why not? So, okay, you're now in Victoria and you're not that far away from where I am. I'm curious if you've noticed a completely different culture or a shift between East and West Coast. I mean, we have our own rivalries in different areas.
Yeah.
And Verity's going to shake her head at this, but
yeah, and I'm not sure that it's just an East and West thing. I think it was just 2 completely different communities.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've noticed over here, so I did admittedly go into the CFA here in this town, and again, I think it's just the combination of the particular people that were there. I didn't quite click in that atmosphere, and also, at the moment I've got quite a number of things going on, quite different to what I was doing in WA. So for me, it wasn't the right fit. And so what I did find though was the ambulance service here is fantastic and quite similar in camaraderie and the community spirit that I had in WA. So that was the choice that I made to go. Rather than the CFA, I went with ambulance. And so that's where I'm at now.
Wow. Oh my God. Okay. So fighting fires and saving people's lives in that way wasn't enough. You're now a community officer for the ambulance service, which is, again, saving people's lives. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose it is. And again, it's like, I don't, it's just something that I enjoy doing. And it's not that I'm doing it because I want to be a hero or that I want to save lives or anything. It's a skill that I have really fell in love with.
And how do you think it's helped you? Like in terms of like motherhood, like there's so many stereotypes around motherhood, and society has all these expectations of mothers around all of our communities and society, and it's kind of like this feeling where mothers have to put everybody else first. Like I know with my children, we'll go to the beach and I'm the only one who didn't pack my bathers, but I've packed everybody else's.
Yeah.
Or, we'll go somewhere and I'm the only one who, I forgot to pack my jumper, but I've packed everybody else's.
Yeah.
Like we always seem to sort of get caught up in taking care of everybody else's needs, because that's, what we're kind of programmed, I think, to do as mothers, is to think about everybody else first. And we do lose, like so many women, will admit that they lost their identity when they became mothers. And I know so many people in my life and through clients who, as when they stepped into motherhood, it was kind of like the dads were still off going, cycling every morning, or going to the gym in the afternoon, catching up with their mates on the way home from work for a beer or whatever else, going to concerts with their mates, and, mum stuck at home, like with children, doing the laundry still, and, feeding kids and bathing them. And I've seen so many women who lives seem a lot more caged and a lot more sort of bound by home duties, just because they're a female. It's like this loss of identity in who we are. Like motherhood can, and it does very, granted, as we have a newborn baby,
Yeah.
you're literally attached to that child for the first year. Like there's not really much
Absolutely.
of, doing anything else with your life, and you're pretty much sleep deprived.
Yes.
But how is that then? Like, how have you been able to manage, like, going on this journey of motherhood and still being able to do this volunteer, superhero work?
So I think one of the biggest things for me has been, so my partner and I, we co-parent, and when I say that, I don't mean we're separated, we're together, but we pretty much have half responsibilities. So I'm, I suppose, notorious to say that I very rarely do washing and dishes and cooking. My partner's a chef, and he's really good in the kitchen, and he likes everything clean. And so he tends to do a lot of the house duties, because he's really good at it, and I think he gets satisfaction out of that. And so, in that sense, that kind of job is, I don't even think about that.
Yeah.
Which I'm really, really lucky, I must admit, to be able to say that, because I know that it's certainly not the case for a lot of women. And so I think I was really lucky in that sense. And Chris is really hands-on with our son Harley. So he and I think it's also the setup that we've got. So he works within our business. So we run a boutique hotel and restaurant, and so he works predominantly in the business, and although he works on split shifts, so he's got Harley in the afternoons, and that's when I normally go in and do my own work during that time. And so we are closed on Mondays and Tuesdays, which is the days that I usually am on call with ambulance. So yeah, it's kind of a balance, and I think one of the biggest things is I've got a lot of support, not only through my partner, but his mum also lives here in Yea. So she has Harley. She's got him at the moment. She has him for a couple of hours on a couple of days a week, and he also goes to kinder. So it's really balancing, I think.
Yeah, and I think this is something that society doesn't do very well, where everyone kind of gets given a role and you have to like deal with it, and we forget that it does take a community to raise a child, and it's not just about
Absolutely.
raising the child, but it also supports the mother and the father, so they don't lose their sense of identity, that they're still not just functional members within the household, but they can still be functional contributing members outside and connected to their community, which is so powerful.
It is, and I think it's really important, and something that does tend to be missing, especially I find in cities. Like I grew up in Melbourne, but I have lived quite a lot of my life in regional areas since I was like 18, and I found the connection and the community spirit within regional communities is a lot stronger. Just in my personal experience, I could be, I'm sure there are sort of pockets within the cities that do have great communities.
I'd agree with you.
Yeah, I think in general, the regional areas are stronger because you walk down the street and you know everyone.
Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it, though, because we live so more compacted in our cities, and yet we're so much more disconnected.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons that we've chosen to live in a small community, because of that. I think it's really important.
Yeah, I'd agree. There's so much benefit to being able to walk down the street and know the person at the post office that's serving you.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful. It really is. Like, if you're not, I don't know, if you're particularly sort of like inward person, shy person, you don't like interacting, well, you're kind of forced to.
Yeah.
There's that.
There is that, yeah.
But there's also just that wonderful thing of watching your community grow and develop, like literally the people like that you watch your community grow up from the time they're born.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah, and I think especially in the area that I'm in now is a really strong community, but also it's what you put in. So for me, I do quite a lot of community work, like ambulance, and I'm on a few like arts committee and things like that. And so I think you really get out what you put in.
Yeah, it's so true. But at the same time, it's really one of those things I think that a lot of women really struggle with. Like, between juggling motherhood, work, and then pursuing the things that actually light us up and feed us at a soul level.
Yeah.
Being, supporting, the school that your kids go to, running them to different things, activities, in the week, if they're playing soccer or if they've got art classes or, ballet classes or whatever, any swimming lessons. How can women balance all of these different roles, but all these different needs that they have that allows them to, I guess, experience, the different aspects of their personality. So they're not just a mother. Yes.
I think it's knowing what you value as an individual is really important. And not only that, being able to bring that into the family as well. So knowing what each person or each member of the family, what's important to them. And I think it really stems from that. And I think one of the best models that I found, you've probably heard of it, from Tony Robbins, as the 6 core needs. And I speak about that a little bit in the Coach Yourself to Confidence workbook that I mentioned earlier. And it's really a structure for how to figure out what's important to you and find different vehicles within your life to be able to meet those needs really resourcefully. So, for example, and one of my examples is this volunteer work that I do. So with the ambulance and, the fire and rescue a couple of years ago, it's meeting all of my needs. So my need for certainty is met hugely through myself, in the sense that I'm confident to go through all the training, and I'm confident that when that pager goes off, that I can handle whatever comes my way in that job. It meets my need for uncertainty or variety and adventure, because I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen when that pager goes off. It's meeting my need for significance because, there's a lot of recognition within that role. It's meeting my need for connection because I'm working with a lot of different people within the community. It's meeting my need for growth because I'm learning so much all the time. And it's also meeting my need for contribution because I'm giving back to the community, in a sense. So that's one example of how I'm meeting my personal needs through that role. And I think as mothers, it sometimes can be a challenge to be able to do that because, for example, every time I put my ambulance pants on, my son says, "Why have you got those pants on? What are you doing?" It's like he knows that I'm going to be probably going out on a job, and so it can be hard to say, you know what, I'm on call today, and I might get a call out, and so I might have to go and help somebody with the ambulance, and I know he doesn't love it when I leave, and so for as a mother, that can be really hard.
Yeah.
But I know that it's really worth it in the end, because it means I'm meeting my needs really resourcefully, and that means I can be a better mother when I'm
Yeah,
here.
definitely. And also a really great role model, you know what I mean, in terms of, as he gets older and stuff, being able to have those conversations of why you do what you do and setting that example that I think so many families need, having the example of giving back to the community, of thinking of more than just ourselves, of kind of the bigger picture of, connecting and giving and just having that beautiful generosity. Like, it's so powerful.
Oh,
And they're not
yeah.
always things that we teach our children on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I think it's something. Like I feel like I'm sort of saying this without really knowing, but I'm not sure that it's really taught in schools.
It's not.
because it's been so long since I've been at school, and I don't have a school-age children, so I don't really know, but I don't think it's taught in schools, and so it really does, and so it should really be down to the parents to teach these kind of life skills. Because it's so important, especially with, you look around and see a lot of mental health issues, and I think that's becoming more prevalent now. And I think knowing these things, having really strong values and connections to the community seriously helps with mental health.
Oh, massively. I can tell you, years ago, I was living in all sorts of different places because I was in share housing, because that's a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
And the community, like, just going from different suburbs, like from like Burwood to Knoxfield, was in like miles apart in terms of what the community was able to do and how they support you. And then being able to come back to my home suburb, and it's a completely different playing field, and it's not like a completely rural town, but it is sort of on the verge of that. And just the level of support and sort of strength you get from that communal, I don't know, it's like everyone's invested in each other, and they want to see you do well. So even if they're not like directly supporting you, like, what's a really good example? I know that I can walk down to like my local bakery and I can just chill in there for a bit if I'm having a bad day, and it's fine because they know that that's what you need to do and they're cool with it. It's a bit of a weird example, but yeah.
No, I mean, I get that. I mean, often at our business, so we've got like I said, a hotel. So we often get people just to come in and just have a chat. They just, local people who I know just want to come in. They might have a drink or a coffee or something, and they just want to have a chat.
Yeah. I'm really curious about something, because I feel like with where you're at, which is in such an awesome place in your life, with all of the incredible things that you do and how you do it, I feel like we've sort of skipped a step for people, because you've been really clear about your values and how you got to where you are and how you manage it. But I feel like there's something missing there, and I'm wondering if you ever had to try and do some form of mental or emotional gymnastics about inner critic, or, those really deeply embedded things that we're taught, like expectations.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what your insights are there.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was younger, I was really, really shy, really painfully shy. And to the point where, at school, I would never, ever put my hand up to answer a question or to ask a question. I would just kind of do my own thing and be as quiet as possible, trying not to be noticed. And so I think for me, I was so desperately wanting to be really confident. In fact, my favorite quote, I just wrote a blog about this the other day, actually. I had this mug that said, "Dance like no one is watching. Live like heaven," that quote.
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone knows that quote. And so I really wanted to be able to live like that, but there was just something that I know I couldn't get past. I didn't know what it was, and so it took a lot of time for me. And one of the things I think helped was that I decided to study acting at university. It was something I was really interested in, and I think because I was so shy, acting was a way for me to pretend to be somebody else with confidence. And so it wasn't really me that was up on stage, it was the character, right? And so I did 3 years of drama school and absolutely loved that. And within that program there's quite a lot of personal development, and so that for me was huge. And then after that time, I think university is a big step for a lot of people, where it's a huge time of exploration, figuring out who you are as a person rather than attached to the family. And I think for me, I was lucky enough to choose to go to a university that was not in my hometown. So I moved out of home. And then after university, I got a job touring around Australia with a theatre company. And so myself and my friend, we travelled around the whole of Australia. And that journey for me, it really literally has been a journey, physically and mentally. So I spent a lot of time traveling, and it was, I suppose, my way of finding out who I was, and reading a lot of books. So through drama school, doing some personal development through that, I picked up a few, the probably called self-help books or personal development books, and that had really helped me during that time. And then after that year, I went over to America and got a job as a tour guide. And so,
Wow.
and so I traveled all over America as a tour guide. So I got my bus license, and and I suppose each thing that I did was helped to build more confidence within myself and helped to build myself up. So I was consistently doing new things and challenging myself. And I think that's a big part of figuring out who you are, is actually getting out and doing something.
And I think that's what women struggle with so much with motherhood, is that they find it so physically hard to go out and do something.
Yes.
They don't have the same amount of energy. They don't have the time.
I would say even possibly the confidence in their body.
Yeah, the confidence in the body definitely can get disrupted. But it's fascinating. Like I'm 40 and I've got 2 kids, and I've got a younger brother and sister, young siblings, and they're off exploring the world and doing amazing things. And I always look back and think, my God, I wish I'd had that confidence when I was their age. But where I was settling down, getting married, having children, my sister's off in America, getting, jobs, with, doing social media accounts for celebrities. And I'm just like, oh my God. And this is, a young woman who's had massive anxiety and depression issues, and yet she travels around the world doing these incredible things. And it does kind of, for me, with what you're saying, bring it quite close to home, where how do women who feel that they're locked down, who can't travel, who can't leave the house for extended periods of times, what about even single mothers who don't have a partner to fall back on? How can those women, who are probably even listening to us talk, how can they extend their circle to be able to practice more confidence?
That's a really great point. And I think for me, I was so lucky to have that opportunity to go and explore through myself. And I think if I had done life differently and had kids early and become a mother early, I think it would have been a really different journey. And so I can't really say how I would personally handle that, because I've not lived it. But I think one of the biggest things, and like I mentioned before, really figuring out, and you can do this, like I said, the workbook that I've developed is a really great tool to start with, because rather than going out and finding yourself because you may not have time, to be able to actually just sit down in some quiet space when the kids are in bed with a glass of wine, and actually figure out, what is really important to me, and start to think about what are the things that you've enjoyed in your past, and where have you been really successful in your past? What are the things that really light you up, and start actually thinking about that, and maybe even having a conversation with some girlfriends, about these things that actually really matter. Because I think that's a big thing. As a mother, being connected with other women who are in a similar situation, and to have conversations that are meaningful rather than, oh, so-and-so did this, or,
Master Chef this.
Yeah. And, I think there are definitely women out there who want to have these conversations and really need to have these conversations, because, if you are in a place where you feel like you're stuck and you feel like it's hard to get out and to make the choices that are right, not only for you but for your family, it's really important to start building connections that you can start to rely on. So whether it's a friend who you've got kids the same age, and maybe one day a week you swap, not swap kids, but you'll have their kids for an hour, just so the other one can go out and go for a run or go for a swim or something, do something for themselves. So, and it comes back to this whole thing about community, and I think that's a real theme for me, is building those connections so that we can, and I think that's another thing as a mum, and women in particular, is it's really easy to get stuck thinking that we have to do it all on our own.
So true.
And we have to do everything, right, and we might be perceived as, a bad mum if we don't do this, that, and the other. And so I think it's really important to have other people to be able to lean on.
Yeah, I've been really lucky to find this really beautiful group of women that I did through I met through a study course, and they're such an amazing group of and really inspirational women. And we went away, well, it was definitely last year, down south, and everyone, it was really interesting because we were doing the whole, do we bring our kids, do we not bring kids? And one of the women said, oh look, my husband works away, if I can't bring my kids, I can't come, which is fine, just let me know what's good for you. And I was in the same position as well, actually being a single mother, and I was like, bring the kids, like we can, like you need a break as well, like we'll all co-parent as a group. And there was one day where my oldest daughter was really upset and in tears, and I went to, sort of went in for the hug and to nurture and be like, okay, let's go for a walk and talk about it. And one of these dear women just like literally stopped me. She just like put her hand on my chest and was like, no, you stay here and have a cup of tea. She goes, I've got this. And I was like, oh my God, I don't even know if my daughter knows who you are. And she took my daughter off, to a little cafe, and, they ended up having a great chat. And it was this really amazing feeling of, that we can actually count on other people, that, like you said, we don't have to do everything on our own. But for many people, especially a lot of women that live in, city areas, you do feel like it has to be done on your own, or there aren't any options, or when it's both partners working, or if you're a single parent, it can be very, very lonely to be in, motherhood, and then you've got to try and find your identity on top of that, and the confidence to own that identity, which I think is really fascinating, because you were just saying before, can we pretend to be confident until we get it, like that whole fake it till you make it? Is that really a thing?
Well, I don't know. And through my journey, I think that's helped, but I don't know if it was what has created the confidence. I actually think it's more likely to be going out there and experiencing new things and
Yeah.
and challenging myself, rather than, oh, I feel confident because I can be another character when I'm on stage. And I think there are definitely ways and strategies which you can help yourself to feel more confident, like creating anchors, chaining anchors, that kind of thing, which is probably something that's really beyond this conversation right now. But there are definitely strategies that you can use to help that. But yeah, I'm still, the jury's out for me whether you can actually fake it till you make it, because it really is. It's about taking action and
Yeah.
and you know, if there is something that you feel that you don't have the confidence to do right now, then you know, what's the first step that you could take, or is there a different way to approach it? So as an example, it might be, let's say, public speaking. If you have an opportunity to go and be a speaker at an event, and maybe this is beyond some people's vision right now, but you know, and you're really nervous about that. Well, how can you find a way to be able to practice in a smaller setting? You know,
Yeah.
so taking the smaller steps to build up to being able to have the confidence, because confidence doesn't come when you're sitting on the couch. Like it just doesn't, and you're not going to feel that confidence before you do the thing. The confidence and the courage actually shows up once you're doing it, because you're kind of like, oh, actually, this isn't so bad. Like, I can actually do this when you're doing it, not before you do it.
So it's almost like a muscle, isn't it, that needs
Yes,
exercising.
absolutely.
So the more that we practice, and I think confidence isn't something where and I guess it's probably, like, it's almost more like courage, like having the courage to own or to build the confidence.
Yeah.
That I guess a lot of people probably need to focus on, because it's like we have this idea of, oh, we've got to suddenly be confident. It's like, well, I can't just suddenly be confident,
No.
but I can find the courage to try to be confident.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or to practice, or to put myself in a situation. And I was just reading, oh my goodness, I was just reading this book, Denise Duffield Thomas's book, and she was saying there's still things that she does now as a self-made, you know, millionaire, where she kind of still shits herself. And, you know, sometimes the fears don't go away, and people are like, oh, but you're so confident. She's like, oh, I've just practiced a lot.
Yeah, and the fears, like, fear is inbuilt into our, like, human behavior. It's a part of human behavior. It's not going to go away. We need fear.
Yeah.
And so I think the courage is really being able to say, you know what, I know I have fear around this, but this fear is, it's not a real fear. It is a real fear, but it's not a real threat. I'm not going to put myself in danger. It's not a life and death situation here. I know that I feel that fear, but I'm going to push past that and do it anyway.
Yeah.
And that's when you start building that confidence, is when you actually acknowledge that there's fear and still continue anyway.
Yeah, which is so beautiful. And I think it's such a nice way to look at confidence. Like, it's not just something, you know, that you mentioned before, that we're just born with. It's not something that comes in a test tube or in a pill.
No.
Where you just suddenly, you're in.
Maybe she's born with it.
Yeah.
Oh God.
But I think we do look at people and we go, oh, they're such a confident person. Like it was an innate, you know, quality that they were born with. And I'm sure there are definitely people who are naturally confident.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot more people who are not naturally confident.
Yeah.
And how can you be when we live in the society that we do, that has so many rules and regulations and, you know, dictates who we should be because you're a female, because you're a male, because you're a child, because you're an adult, because you're a mother, because you're not a mother. You know, there's so many rules out there and expectations. And to be able to navigate those, you know, can be so challenging, and that can really have a massive, massive impact on our ability to be confident.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got a really good point there. I think the society has a lot to answer for.
Doesn't it just?
And you know what? At the end of the day, I think we've got to let go of some of those expectations and
All of
opinions
them.
of others. Yeah, yes, most of them. Maybe not the ones that are going to land us in jail, but
Yeah. Murdering is still bad, people.
yeah, still bad. But I think a lot of those social expectations, we need to go, well, hold on a second. Is this serving me? Is it moving me in the direction that I want to go in? And if it's not, well, and this also takes courage to dump that, that belief and that idea, the expectation of others. And that's something I think that also takes time to practice, in a sense. Is, who am I actually going to listen to here? Am I going to listen to the really negative comment on my Facebook post from somebody that I don't even know, or am I going to listen to the opinions of the people around me who love who I am and want to support me?
I love that. It's basically like the whole Brené Brown thing. Unless you're in the arena with me, your opinion doesn't mean shit.
Absolutely. Yeah. I fully believe that. Is that, you know what, if somebody wants to have a go at me on Facebook, like, go right ahead. It ain't going to affect me, because it's not an opinion that I can care about, because if we take on all these opinions from outsiders who really we don't even know, then it just kind of beats at your self-esteem and your confidence. So being really selective in the people that we speak to and listen to when it comes to building up our confidence, I think, is really important. One of the really great things one of my mentors said when knowing who to take feedback from is asking 2 questions, and maybe not directly to the person, but just in your mind. Who are you and what have you done?
Yeah.
So, like, if I am wanting some advice or some feedback on accounting, right, I'm probably going to go to an accountant, because I know that they have those skills. And rather than, like, if I want advice on, how to become a really great public speaker, I'm probably not going to go to that same accountant, right? Like, who are you and what have you achieved? And have you achieved the things that I want to achieve? And they're the people that you can take feedback from.
I really love this, because this is not just using your critical thinking, it's also using your critical analysis skills. Like, it's being a really careful curator of what comes into your world.
Absolutely. And I think that's where this whole mindfulness thing comes into play, is that, if you're not conscious, if you're not consciously aware of the conversations you're having, of the thoughts that are running through your head, then it's really hard to pick up those things. But if you are in a space where you are understanding and picking and choosing consciously the people and the thoughts that you're letting in your mind, then that's when things really start to become, I don't want to say the word better is terrible, but do you know what I mean? That's when you start to bring it all together.
Yeah, and it does. It's like being able to free up your mind from all those fearful thoughts. It creates space for you to actually step into who you do want to be and embrace, I guess what we'd refer to as the real version of, ourselves, or the true essence of who we are. But when our heads are filled up with so much stuff, especially, the bullshit that society tells us, and, images on Instagram of these, perfect Insta lives, and we think, oh shit, like, that's not what my body looks like. Oh my God, that's not what my life looks like. And there was an amazing video that went around ages ago, and it was by a lady who does have an amazing Instagram lifestyle, and she makes a business out of it, but she decided to show everyone what the reality of it looked like. and it
Yeah,
was
cool.
so funny. And she was showing, and she was talking about how much sand she's had up her, her backside and in places where she never wanted sand, and because she's got to put her body in like ridiculous poses that are totally not natural. And she was taking photos of all the crazy flights and what she actually does look like when she gets off a plane, when she lands in another country, and her time schedule. Like, she's got these amazing photos of her being in Bali or somewhere like that, and an amazing bikini shots, and like just living like the traveling entrepreneur's dream. And then she's like, by the way, we had to do this in 3 days. And I had to
Yeah.
take 6 pair of bathers to every location.
Oh my God.
Sorry,
And yeah,
getting rid of my dog. Every location we went to had to have like 6 changes of clothes and bathers. And she said it's not as glamorous as what you think.
yeah. And I think that is a big problem, is social media is like bombarding us with all these images that we feel like we need to aspire to. And we feel like that's what society is telling us we need to be like.
Yeah.
Whereas, most people don't want, don't necessarily want that lifestyle. And shouldn't need to be, a size 4 or whatever. So I think, it's making sure that we don't take that on board in a way that damages our self-esteem. It's like, if I don't look like that, then I'm not good enough. But hold on a second, most people don't look like that. Even that person doesn't look like that. It's photoshopped.
Yeah,
or it's in a position where it makes them look like that. So, and again, it's bringing it back to being really conscious and aware of what you're letting into your mind, because our mind is, it really runs us, and it's a way that we can, what we are letting into our mind, our thoughts, create our results, essentially, because what we're feeding our mind is what we actually do, is results in the actions that we take. So and one of the things that I've been focused on over the last couple of years is meditation, and I think that's one of the ways that you can actually bring yourself back into becoming really aware and really mindful. And I know it's a bit of a buzzword at
No,
the
but
moment.
it's so true, isn't it? I think that's what lacks in society. We're not mindful.
Yeah.
And we create so much clutter and so much waste. You even look at the impact on the environment, whether you believe in climate change or not. There's always better things that we can do to make the environment healthier. And yet so many of us don't recycle, and there is so much rubbish on the streets and in our oceans. There's so many things that we aren't mindful about. Like, I see people all the time, and it's actually one of the things that cracks me up, especially, is if I see the cyclists who are they're couriers, but they're on bicycles.
They're on bikes, yeah,
in the cities and stuff. And if one of them like hits a pole and falls off their bike, I can't help it. I will crack up laughing. I don't know why. I've had my friends ring me from the office buildings, go, babe, you've never just guessed what we've just seen. And I'll crack up laughing even though I didn't see it. I don't know why, but it's still that level, isn't it? Of they're obviously not being mindful if they've literally like rode their bikes into a pole. They're not looking where they're going. I see my kids trip up all the time. I see my dog run into glass doors, although that's not his fault because he doesn't realize it's glass. But we can all do, like, how many times have you burnt dinner? How many times have you said something you didn't realize? How many times have you tuned out and people trying to get your attention? How many times did you say something without even realizing what you were saying? Like, we aren't very skilled at being mindful as a society.
And again, it's something that we need to practice. Like, it doesn't come naturally, so people say, well, how do you actually, like, I can't clear my mind enough to meditate. I'm like, well, it's not really about that. It's, and it takes time to actually build up to a point where you feel like, oh, I'm actually meditating. And so I think that that's one of the barriers when it comes to meditation, at least. There are so many different ways that you can practice mindfulness. This is just one of the ones that I found works for me. And, I know it's probably not going to be for everyone. But like I said, I've created this guided meditation around building confidence. And I think that the messages that we give ourselves, and this is another way to help increase your levels of confidence and your self-esteem, is to become more mindful.
Yeah, and I love that. And we're going to include that link. So the link is confidence.kellypetering.com.au /meditation. So we'll include that link on the notes for people so that you can actually find that meditation. And yeah, what you said is really true. Like, the more mindful we are, and it's not easy to just, it's not like you can go, okay, yeah, cool, I'll be mindful from now on, got it, done.
If only.
I wish, right? I wish. Tick that off list. But I've got my teenage daughter, she's 13, and she's been learning all of this stuff from me for years, and yet it's still like slowly sinking in for her. And I took them for a bike ride yesterday to our local pubs. We could get lemon lime bitters, and we do our little like sit down and talk about our day and things like that, which is really cute. And she wanted to show me what her goals were that she'd come up with that day. And her goals were, like, to be prepared to make new friendships and leave toxic ones behind. To be who
That's
you
really
want
grown up. Like, that's really mature.
Cool.
To, so sweet. She's got here as well, be who you want to be, not what people expect you to. Do what makes me feel good. Remember, I'm just as important as everybody else in this world. Connect with family and friends. They're the most important people in my life, and they'll help me through thick and thin. And believe in the impossible. Anything can happen if I believe that it can. And she's like, Mum, these are my goals. And I was expecting that when she was like, oh, I spent my day writing out my goals, like of things she wanted to, like physical, tangible things that she wanted to accomplish. But instead she showed me this list, and I was like, oh my God, I love you so much.
Oh, that is gorgeous.
But that took like a whole, couple of years of conversations for her to, and she's 13, so let's not rush it too quickly.
Yeah.
But, it was such a beautiful way for her that she just spent time actually being mindful about how she wanted this year, because she had a horrific year last year at high school. There was, like you were saying, we don't teach kids kindness. We don't teach them optimism. We don't teach them generosity. We don't teach them confidence at school. And so I think, this is so beautiful that you do this work with women now, because it is needed, and it's not something that most of us got in our education. And I don't think, unless you had mindful parents, it's not something that you learn at home either.
Yeah. Well, your daughter is well ahead of the curve, I got to say. Amazing. That's all. Well, yeah, like there would be a lot of people who, when they think about setting goals, it is all that external. Whereas what really matters is what's going on within us. And to get that at 13, wow.
Yeah, I know. I've got to rewrite my goals now, because all of mine were kind of like solid shit. And I was like, great, thanks for showing me up there, kid. So yeah, I've got my homework today.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kelly. It's been incredible to talk to a hero of the community.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fantastic. I really enjoy these conversations. So
yeah, they're so important. And if anyone wants to download Kelly's free workbook, Coach Yourself to Confidence, that's also on Kelly's website, which is www.kellypetering.com.au. So you can download all of her yummy goodness there. You can find her meditation as well, and you can start getting yourself along the path of feeling more confident and empowered, especially as a female in our society.
Woo!
Awesome. Thank you.
Hey, if you want to continue this conversation, head over to our Facebook page and be part of the revolution. You can find us at Good Girls Don't Podcast on Facebook. Please note, we cannot create change alone. Your support, likes, comments, shares, and iTunes reviews help us to give a voice to the insanely inspirational women and the controversial issues that we discuss.
If you'd like to be a part of our podcast, or if you have an issue that you have a burning desire for us to bring into the light, please contact us. With fierceness, Ashley.
And Verity.
Get ready for the rain.